Hello viewers, and welcome to another live-action commentated match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today, I'm honored to present you with the very first video sent in to me by my friend currently sitting to the right. His name is Travis McDaniel, and in today's game, he's going to be playing as our As of Decree of Ruin released, most recent Astra Militarum faction Warlord Broderick Worr. On the opposite end of the table resides his opposition, Sir Alexander Gentry, and what makes this match particularly special is that this is going to be my very first opportunity to show off the tabletop version of our most recent Dark Eldar faction Warlord Archon Salaine Morn. We can clearly see that Travis, our player to the right, is going to be in possession of our initiative token, and he spent his first couple deploy actions putting into play 2 total supports and giving away his choice of allied faction. His opening play was going to be a copy of the tried and true Orc support, the 1-cost Ammo Depot, where as soon as Travis possesses 3 or fewer cards in hand as an action as a bit of a deploy stall, he can stand to exhaust that support, add an additional card to his hand, and new, as of our most recent war pack, Boundless Hate, we've got a copy of the 0-cost limited support, the Astra Militarum faction Troop Transport. It's got the limited keyword, but as an action you can exhaust and sacrifice that support in order to put 1/1/2 soldier trait guardsman token into play at any planet you would like. And if that destination happens to be a green strongpoint possessing planet, then you stand to put 2 guardsman tokens into play instead. Broderick Worr himself is a 2/6 warlord, and whenever an Astra Militarum faction unit you control happens to be sitting at a planet laden with a green strongpoint type icon, it gets a +1 attack value bonus, it cannot retreat, and it cannot be routed. So for the low, in fact unbeatable cost of 0 resources, that new loyal support essentially affords you the opportunity to potentially put 2/2 soldier trait tokens into play that synergize perfectly with Elysian Assault Team and all number of other different Astra Militarum faction cards. But we've also got a copy of the support Staging Ground in play in Travis's HQ. That costs 1. As an action, you can exhaust it in order to deploy a 2 or lower cost unit from your hand to any planet you would like. Fully usable during combat. Note, we've got that copy of Ammo Depot being exhausted as a bit of a card draw and deploy stall maneuver. And last but not least, on Travis's side of the table thus far, we've got a copy of the signature army unit, the Anxious Infantry Platoon, put out to planet number 1. Planet number 1 is a green strongpoint type icon possessing planet, so the infantry platoon for the cost of 2 not just has a command icon, not just has 3 attack and 3 hit points, but it's going to be able to swing for 4. Normally it's got a forced reaction where at the end of a combat round you have to pay 1 resource in order not to retreat it, but considering Broderick Worr is on the tabletop, considering he is Hale, that means you basically have the opportunity to entirely ignore that forced reaction. But on the opposite end of the table for Archon Salaine Morn, she herself is a 2/7 warlord. Note, planet number 1, we've got a copy of the 2-cost, 2 attack, 2 hit point, 1 command icon, flying keyword Hellion Gang. They've got the Raider trait, and that means that limit once per phase, whenever, as an Archon Salaine Morn player, you put out a Cabalite or Raider trait unit to a red material type icon possessing planet, you essentially have the opportunity to refund 1 resource token, albeit limit once per phase. So normally you could see that once during deploy, like with a Hellion Gang, or also during combat, like with the signature army unit, the 2-cost Shadowed Thorns Pillagers that we see put out to planet number 3. For the cost of 2, it's got 2 attack, 2 hit points, and 1 command icon. It's got the ambush keyword, but note, neither that Cabalite at planet 3, nor the Raider at planet number 1 happen to be sitting at red material type icon possessing planets, so therefore Archon Salaine Morn has not, unfortunately, had the opportunity to trigger either of her resource refunding abilities. But for our Archon Salaine Morn playing Alexander Gentry, we've also got a copy of Rogue Trader positioned at planet number 2 and planet number 4 for a bit of an early game resource bonus. And then back to Travis's side of the table, at planet number 2, we've got a copy of Sanctioned Psyker sitting there with both of its command icons, conveniently blocking off the Dark Eldar player from winning command. Not only is that Psyker threatening to win a couple of cards, but it's also shutting down that 1-card bonus. But looks like our current first command phase is ongoing. Broderick decides to show up at planet number 4. Archon Salaine Morn shows up at planet number 2. Planet number 1, 2, and 3 all are green. They all possess those green strong point type icons. That's going to be highly relevant to Broderick Worr. And note planet number 4 and planet number 5 are going to be red. Planet number 5 is also green, and that in turn might end up being relevant to our Dark Eldar player, depending on what exactly our players draw. Looks like they had the goodwill of sharing the contents of their hands with us just now. But note planet number 1, that's going to be a couple of resources to the actually no, neither player is going to win command at that planet, but the Anxious Infantry platoon with initiative is going to swing for a threatened 4, cut in half thanks to that flying keyword down to 2, but it looks as though that does manage to kill off that copy of the Hellion Gang without any card discarded as shields. So that's going to be presumably Ossus 4 captured by Travis. That's going to be -1 resource for our Dark Eldar player, +1 resource for Travis is what I would be saying if it looked as though our Dark Eldar player had any resources left. But planet number 2, note the presence of Archon Salaine Morn manages to shut down that Sanctioned Psyker. That's going to be 2 cards and a resource 1 by our Dark Eldar player. Archon Salaine Morn herself is a 2/7. That Sanctioned Psyker, note, thanks to Broderick Worr, is going to be a 1/4 that cannot retreat, cannot be routed. The Sanctioned Psyker takes a swing of 1, potentially threatening to kill off that copy of the Rogue Trader, and let's see if we end up seeing a card discarded as shields. Note, planet number 3 is going to be a card and a resource 1 by our Dark Eldar player, and it looks as though we saw a copy of the 2-cost signature event Inevitable Betrayal discarded as a shield. So that is a hell of a powerful effect to see discarded, but probably it's, out of all the matchups in the world, it's probably going to be least useful against Broderick Worr. Inevitable Betrayal, basically you play it during, traditionally the combat phase. Note, Archon Salaine Morn takes another swing, kills off that copy of the Sanctioned Psyker. That's going to be a random card discarded from Travis's hand, but regardless, that signature event, let's say at the beginning of the combat phase, you pick a planet, you pick any number of undamaged enemy army units present at that planet, and you treat their printed text boxes as though they were blank, including traits, which is normally incredibly powerful, but Broderick Worr's ability affects Astra Militarum faction units, and, you can't blank a card's faction identity, and just like we saw that Preemptive Barrage randomly discarded, you can't exactly blank a card ability or effect that comes externally. Like Preemptive Barrage, granting a unit ranged will not be blanked because it's coming from an external card effect. So looks like Broderick Worr killed off that copy of the Rogue Trader. He had the opportunity to trigger any number of different planetary abilities. Our soon-to-be planet number 1 is Boundless, that random card discard planet. It looks like Planum, our soon-to-be planet number 2, is what ended up being activated. So we saw that Anxious Infantry platoon being relocated from Broderick Worr's HQ to our soon-to-be planet number 1, and considering the first 3 planets all happen to possess those green strongpoint icons, it's entirely possible that we could see a very early game victory indeed. Note, initiative is supposed to be bouncing to our player to the left, but we've yet to see the actual initiative choke and exchange hands, and our opening deploy action here for Archon Salaine Morn, whom technically isn't supposed to be exhausted, is going to be a copy of Void Pirate played out to our current planet number 4. Looks like our current planet number 5 is going to be ever so slightly off of screen. Hopefully our players end up catching that and shifting our planets up so that they're all on camera. But note, on Broderick Worr's side of the table, we've got another copy of that incredibly powerful troop transport. He's now going to threaten to be able to generate 4 guardsman tokens at either planet number 1 or planet number 2. Note, at a green planet, those are going to be 2/2 tokens that can't retreat, they cannot be routed. And we also saw a copy of the enormously powerful signature support, a 1 out of 50 cards card. It's going to be the forward barracks for Broderick Worr. So at the end of a combat round, so long as you have an Astra Militarum faction unit sitting there at a planet, you stand to generate an additional guardsman token, and if it's at a green planet, need I say it again, it's going to be a 2/2. So, a couple additional interesting deploys. Note, we've got a copy of the 2-cost, 2/2, no command icon, Kabalite Strike Force. It's got Area Effect 1, that's going to be positioned at our current planet number 3, Karnath. That is a red material type icon possessing planet. That means you're going to invest 2 resources in it and then regain 1 resource. Looks like our Dark Eldar player threw out a copy of Raid. That's going to be -1 resource for Travis, +1 resource for our Dark Eldar player. And we've also got a copy of the enormously powerful, unique support Archon's Palace, now in Archon Salaine Morn's HQ. Rather fitting, given that nomenclature there. That affords our Archon the opportunity, once per combat phase, to basically pick one of the planets that Broderick Worr is going to end up winning command at, and either shut off that planet's card or resource bonus. So, it's an absolutely monumentally powerful effect, and looks as though we've got another copy of a Kabalite Strike Force positioned at planet number 1, and those area effect units are going to be absolutely clutch when it comes to potentially killing off swaths of guardsman tokens. But considering those troop transports can be used as an action, what's incredibly powerful about those is you can wait until after your opponent uses their area effect, and then you can fill the planets with tokens. And because you can pick and choose when exactly you want to trigger that effect, if your opponent sends their Warlord someplace you weren't expecting, you can kind of compensate or adjust for that fact once you have additional information, and then either bring those units into play or decide, to leave those supports sitting. And, I guess if ever infantry conscripts become a thing, the more supports you have, that, big, never-played Astra Militarum unit could potentially stand to become monumentally powerful. But looks as though we've got a copy of Engine Seer Augur played out to planet number 2. Suffice it to say that 2-cost 2/2, when it dies, you end up being able to look at the top 6 cards of your deck for an Astra Militarum faction support, put that directly into play immediately prior to the interrupt, resulting in the Engine Seer Augur finally leaving play. Interrupts always occur before that unit leaves play. Archon Salaine Morn shows up at planet number 1. Boundless, the random card discard planet. Broderick Worr shows up at our planet number 3. Karnath, a wildcard planet, which allows you to trigger the battle ability of any other planet on the tabletop. And note, we've got a copy of the 1-cost, 1 command, 0/2, but +2 attack bonus whenever it happens to be present at the same planet as a Warlord, Tallarn Raiders, sitting at current planet number 5, Taurus, which, if you control fewer units than does your opponent and you win a battle at that planet, you're rewarded in the form of either 3 resource tokens or having drawn 3 cards off the top of your deck. So keep in mind, we've got that forward barracks in play. Planet number 1, that's going to be 2 cards and resource 1 by Archon Salaine Morn. Looks like that Kabalite Strike Force is going to be taking a swing at the infantry, the Anxious Infantry platoon. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be a 4/3 unit, but it takes 2 points of damage, and now it's going to be Travis's opportunity to take a swing, and should he choose to do so, he'll be able to use that staging ground to put a unit into play at that planet. Note, he's allied with orcs, so we might see an Evil Sun's Warbiker attack for 4, we could see a Snakebite Thug attack for 3, we could see any number of different Astra Militarum faction cards, like another Engine Seer Augur attacking for 3, considering that green planet is being Broderick Worr modified. But looks like the Anxious Infantry platoon is going to take a swing. 4 damage is more than enough to kill off that 2 hit point unit. That area effect 1 ability is going to be gone. Note, Archon Salaine Morn kills off the only remaining unit at that planet, but of course we've got an action window prior to checking for a combat turn on part of that rogue trader that would end the planet. Therefore, that's going to be 2 guardsman tokens. They're both 2/2s. Here's what's going to happen. Let's say those guardsman tokens start to beat up on Archon Salaine Morn. We're going to come to the end of combat round. That means we've got Astra Militarum faction units sitting at that planet. That means that the forward barracks is going to stand to generate additional guardsman tokens. That's going to be 2 points of damage dealt out to Archon Salaine Morn. We see a second guardsman token take a swing. 2 minus 2 is going to be 0, so no additional damage dealt out to Archon Salaine Morn. But here's the order of operations here. We end the combat round. That means a guardsman token is going to generate. Then we ready all of our units. Then the player with initiative, note that should be Archon Salaine Morn at this planet. She's going to have the opportunity to retreat. So she does decide to run away from that planet, but tough break. We still see the generation of that guardsman token. So that's going to be 3 guardsman token winning the battle at that planet. That's going to be another green strongpoint planet won by Broderick Worr. That random card discard happened to be a copy of the Bloodied Reavers discarded into Alexander Gentry's discard pile. And now we're going to see a subsequent combat breakout at planet number 3. That's going to be controlled by Broderick Worr. He himself is a 2/6, and god, that about sucks for our Dark Eldar player. That's going to be a convenient swing of 2, killing off that copy of the Kabbalite Strike Force. Keep in mind, at planet number 2, that was going to be a card and a resource won by our Dark Eldar player. Planet number 3, Broderick Worr ended up shutting off that card bonus associated with that Rogue Trader, so that's going to be a card and a resource for him. Looks like Karnath is presumably what? Is it going to trigger Planum? Is it going to trigger probably not Yavvarn? So let's see, I guess, one of those guardsman tokens perhaps being repositioned at planet number 1. But planet number 4 for both of our players was going to be no contest. Planet number 5 is going to be a card and a resource there to the right for Broderick Worr. Looks as though Travis is trying to make up his mind. What is the most obvious play that you probably want to do? It's going to be Planum, moving that guardsman token to planet number 1. So here's the deal. Dark Eldar Warlord is going to have to do everything in her power to prevent our opposing player from managing to win the game at planet number 1. The initiative token is once again going to be in Travis's possession. Alexander, like a proper sir, takes a moment to show us exactly what is sitting in his hand. Looks like he's got a copy of Inevitable Betrayal, but Travis, he discloses what he's got. He's got a copy of Inquisitorial Fortress. He's got a copy of Preemptive Barrage, which could afford him the opportunity to bestow the ranged keyword upon 3 of his units, and again, that works entirely around Inevitable Betrayal. So what exactly are we going to see? Note, Staging Ground is still a thing. Troop Transport is going to result in 2 guardsman tokens being generated. Forward Barracks is going to be an absolute nightmare for our Dark Eldar player to try to surmount. Really, the best that our Dark Eldar player could hope for is another copy of Kabbalite Strike Force somewhere in that deck, but we've already seen copies. I would be surprised if our Dark Eldar players maybe drawn 20 or so cards this game, so statistically I think it's going to be unlikely that we would see another Kabbalite Strike Force. I happen to forget what exactly the contents are of Alexander's hand, but looks like we see a copy of the signature support, the Nexus of Shadows, being played by our Dark Eldar player. Looks like Salaine Morn is going to be entirely out of resources, much to that player's dismay. Nexus of Shadows is a 1-cost support. As an action, limit once per phase. You can pay 2 resources. You do not need to exhaust it, actually, and you simply draw 1 card. So I suppose I was mistaken. Looks like our player is keeping track of resources with a die, which is actually the very first time I've ever seen a player do that in one of my tabletop games. So 4 resources left. What exactly could Archon Salaine Morn want to dig for? Archon's Terror isn't going to be of any use because, note, our current planet number 1 is going to be green. That means Archon's Terror is not going to be able to rout any of these units. The Kabbalite Strike Force would be pretty good, but I'm really struggling to think of what exactly else our God, what our Dark Eldar player could try to draw to get her out of this one. Copy of Chaos Fanatics put it planet number 2, planet number 5. Note, planet number 5 is going to be Eloith, which allows its victor the opportunity to look at the top 3 cards of his or her deck, choose one of those cards to be placed in his or her hand, and then put the remaining 2 cards at the bottom of the deck. And this about sucks. Check it out. Rogue Trader is going to be showing up at planet number 1, Exhausted. Broderick Worr is going to be showing up at planet number 1. Archon Salaine Morn is going to be showing up at planet number 1. We've got a grand total of 1 command icon associated with planet number 1. Those 2 guardsman tokens currently sitting in Travis's HQ are going to be showing up at planet number 1 Exhausted here as soon as Travis remembers to ferry them over to that planet. We've got that copy of Inquisitorial Fortress, which, if we see like a Clavex War Leader or something being bounced into play, and it looks as though, unfortunately, that is not going to be an option for our Dark Eldar player, that would have been a fantastic opportunity for Travis to use Inquisitorial Fortress to move the unit away from that planet, and it looks as though this is going to be the good game, so GG, well played on part of both of our players, but it looks as though Archon Salaine Morn is going to call the game here. Preemptive Barrage, played out by Travis, would have afforded Broderick Worr, the Engine Seer Augur, and that Guardsman token the opportunity to attack for 3 and 3 and 2, kill off the Shadowed Thorns Pillagers, potentially bloody, or at the very least deal out a monumental amount of damage to Archon Salaine Morn. Those Guardsman tokens would have readied at the end of the round. We would have seen forward barracks stand to generate still additional Guardsman tokens, and there was quite frankly absolutely nothing that Archon Salaine Morn could have done to try to get herself out of that situation. Clavex War Leader could have been very easily routed. I think we still had an additional unused copy of Troop Transport that could have stood to dump an additional 2 Guardsman tokens onto that planet. Travis happened to show us his hand, but if he'd have had additional copies of Elysian Assault Team, that was just an absolute stomp. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. I appreciate your taking the opportunity to watch yet another one of these fascinating live-action commentated games. Be sure to let me know in the comments what your own experiences have been with Archon Salaine Morn. Do you approve of Kabalite Strike Force? How exactly do you construct an Archon Salaine Morn deck? And of course, do you think there's anything that Alexander Gentry or Travis McDaniel could have done to further optimize their play? But as always, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed, as ever, you're always encouraged to share this content, because the more individuals there are that stumble upon these videos, the more people might end up being exposed to Conquest. They may try the game, they might enjoy it, they may someday join our community, and of course, all together we continue to send the message to Fantasy Flight Games, telling them to continue to support this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I would encourage you to do so through Facebook or on Twitter, and if you ever feel so inclined to help support and improve the Hive Tyrant channel, I would be absolutely honored, humbled, and deeply appreciative were you to donate $1 or $2 on a strictly monthly basis to my Patreon. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for much more Conquest LCG content to come.